Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Whether you like the Acolyte or not, this show has brought an entirely new era of Star Wars to live action, and this means there's tons of new lore and interesting questions that the content is bringing to the surface. One of the more interesting things that I think not all fans have noticed is the characters themselves, specifically the Jedi. You know, one of the criticisms that was levied against Andor was that there weren't enough aliens in the TV series. As a matter of fact, there was only one episode where you see aliens at all, and that's during Andor's little beach vacation. And the aliens in that episode were more or less background characters designed to give the audience a feel of unease and wonkiness. You know, because Andor was diverging from his true path in life, which was to be locked up in an Imperial labor camp. Apparently, Tony Gilroy thought that, aliens, specifically aliens in like A New Hope, looked a little weird and took people out of the moment, out of the story. I mean, this guy was totally not a Star Wars fan. He might not even be a sci-fi fan, actually, now that I think about it. But I'm glad that unlike a lot of actors who give that canned interview about how they've loved Star Wars since they were a kid, Tony Gilroy was actually honest about his feelings, and proved to fans that being a fan is not a prerequisite for making good Star Wars content. I almost feel like being too big of a Star Wars fan would make you a terrible Star Wars content creator. I feel like J.J. Abrams was always too afraid of diverging from the original film and basically remade A New Hope, whereas Dave Filoni gets a lot of heat for taking beloved Legends content and then kind of remixing it and using it for his own stories. Anyway, this video is not about those guys. This video is about the Acolyte. And if you haven't noticed, not only are the costumes in this show pretty top-notch, the makeup for some of these new alien characters who we've never seen in live action is on point and surprisingly good. I mean, we've grown quite a lot since the lumpy Grand Inquisitor's head in Kenobi, which not only looked nothing like the cartoons, but also from an aspect ratio standpoint was a huge step sideways. But more importantly, not only these aliens look very interesting, because the aliens I want to talk about today are members of the Jedi Order, there's some really interesting lore things that are happening in the background as well. It seems like the team behind the Acolyte decided to go against some of the more stereotypical alien races you might find in the Jedi Order, and they've included a truly diverse cast of aliens, which is, kind of hard in live action because, again, you need a big budget. Luckily, the Acolyte does have that big budget. And this is really something that fans have been asking for quite some time. Now, to be clear, this channel is still vehemently humanity first. We are against fraternization with the xeno threat. This is just me doing some research so that we are better prepared for the future alien invasion that is sure to come. Anyway, guys, let's take a look at three individual Jedi in the Acolyte that belong to species we rarely ever see in Star Wars. These are some truly unique combinations. Yord Fandar's Padawan, Tassy Loa, looks fantastic. The seamless integration of her headpiece into the actress's face is top-notch makeup work. It probably took many, many hours for them to do this. Now, if I were to guess what species you were outright, I probably would have gotten it wrong. I would have thought maybe she was a near-human species of some kind, maybe the horrific result of what happens if the Tiger King started getting too emotionally attached to his animals. But no, she's actually a feline humanoid that's evolved from a sentient canine species. She's a Zygerrian. And yes, they probably could have made her mouth and nose a little more cat-like, but I understand what they were trying to do here. I mean, you gotta compromise a little bit when you go from animated to live action. Anyway, for those of you guys who know the lore of Star Wars, having a Zygerrian Jedi is almost like an oxymoron. It's an extremely odd combination. So, Zygerrians hail from the planet of Zygerria, and I'm going to stereotype an entire subspecies of mammals here, so hold on a second. Because of their predatory nature and robust physical traits, the Zygerrians developed an extensive mercantile empire that was driven first and foremost by the acquisition and sales of slaves. Okay, maybe the Zygerrians didn't just become slavers because they look like tiger people. It's also because of the location of their planet. S4 on the galactic map, if you guys have your maps pulled out, they're located on a regional trade route known as the Lishol Run, which branches off from the major Perlimian trade route. It's basically one of the most important core to outer rim hyperspace routes. Now, positioned in a relatively unpopulated region of the outer rim, the Zygerrian Empire was for the most part unharassed by the larger powers in the core of the galaxy. Sandwiched between the Tyan cluster and the corporate sector, and at one point Korriban, the home of the Sith Empire, Zygerria remained well connected to all the major factions in the region of the Outer Rim, and was also in one of the more developed parts of the Outer Rim. This meant plenty of trade routes, and limited interruption from the central government. It's basically a perfect location for the trade of illicit goods. Also, there's a lot of distance between Zygerrian space and Hut space, which meant that they had very few competitors in the region. Sometimes your starting location does matter quite a lot. In Zygerria, well, not only was it ideally located for illicit trade, it also lacked valuable resources, and the rocky soil and very hot temperatures on the planet along with a lack of moisture made agriculture quite difficult as well. And so it was only natural for the species to evolve to be more warrior-like and aggressive and look to the stars for more fortune. And so it was only natural for the Zygerrian slave empire to be formed. But here's the thing. When the Ruusan Reformation ended, the Jedi-Sith Wars, it truly brought peace to the galaxy for the first time in thousands of years. And as such, the Jedi were free to pursue other things besides fighting the Sith. This would manifest into a major Outer Rim anti-slavery campaign. You see, slavery had been outlawed by the Galactic Republic Constitution, and the Zygerrian slave empire, while not a part of the Republic, obviously, was flooding the galaxy with cheap illegal labor. And turns out, slavery is not only morally abhorrent, it is actually very terrible for any local economy that it touches. And concentrates wealth into the hands of a few individuals and removes people from the economy. It's the most backwards thing you can do morally, economically, and socially. Treat people good, and generally your nation is more likely to flourish. But anyway, the Jedi would go on to absolutely crush the Zygerrian slave empire in a major conflict. This was such a terrible conflict for the Zygerrians that by the time the Clone Wars starts, hundreds of years later, they're still pretty bitter about this.
For thousands of years, Zygerria supplied slave labor to the galaxy. We prospered. Our customers prospered. Then the Jedi came.
As you can see here, the Zygerrians are formidable combatants. To be able to defeat a Jedi in hand-to-hand combat is very impressive. They also managed to get the upper hand against the Bad Batch in the Bad Batch series. So, these guys are very, very good fighters. But yeah, I have a good feeling, considering how much the Zygerrians hated the Jedi, that Tassy Loa might not have had a traditional route to the Jedi Order. As a matter of fact, I think it's very possible that this Padawan was taken from the Zygerrians, forcefully, either through, some raid of an illicit slaving operation that the Jedi uncover, or maybe considering the enemy status the Zygerrian Empire had against the Empire, the Jedi could have seen any Force user ending up in Zygerrian hands as a great threat to the Order. This is again why the Jedi have to stay out of politics. They just can't stomach the decisions that they have to make here. Because even if Tassy Loa has been educated to understand why the Zygerrians were wrong for being slavers and enjoys being a Jedi, the act of taking a child from their parents against the will of their parents is troubling and morally incorrect. Also, I've also read that Leslie Headland really just wanted a live-action Zygerrian simply because they look cool. Maybe she likes cats, I don't know. But she has inadvertently made a very interesting Star Wars character, a very interesting Jedi who must have a very complicated background, especially if she ever runs into, some Zygerrians or former family members. Next up is the equally interesting Jeki Lon, who so far seems to be the brains in Jedi Master Soul's crew. Like I said before, she gives off Hermione vibes. She's a know-it-all, and I'm sure she'll be equally as deadly in combat when we finally get to see her in action. Now, Jeki Lon is not just some random near-human species with some interesting makeup on. She's actually a feline human hybrid. Feline are a very rare species. They can generally be identified by the 3 horns on the sides of their head, which Jeki Lon has. They also generally have more brightly colored hair and spots on their skin. Jeki, being a Hafu, has some milder feline characteristics. So one of the really sad things about the species is a series of mutations started really affecting the feline, which basically made them unable to reproduce with one another. This is why we start to see a lot more crossbreeding and more feline human hybrids. But overall, the species is still heading towards extinction. And in Legends, actually, the feline hybrids were persecuted by the Empire as impure. This is all very sad because the feline are known for their artistic nature and appreciation for beauty. Felines were known as some of the best painters, musicians, and singers in the galaxy and contributed quite a lot to the galactic art scene. Jeki Lon seems a bit more pragmatic of an individual, though, focused less on the arts and more on her duties as a Jedi Padawan. It seems like her Jedi training, or perhaps her human side, has made her distance herself from her feline heritage. Anyway, it will be interesting to see if Jeki Lon will showcase some of her, feline culture and, racial heritage in the upcoming episodes. Chewbacca was an interesting favorite when Star Wars first released. Maybe the big furball reminds us of our favorite doggos in real life. Maybe there's something just likable about a character that you really can't understand when they speak, but also has perfect aim with his giant crossbow, and an even better aim with his moral compass. And so, it was only natural for, Wookiees to appear in the expanded universe, and not only any Wookiees, but Wookiee Jedi. You're basically taking two things that Star Wars fans love and combining them together. It's a win-win situation. Lobaka, the nephew of Chewbacca, would become one of the first Jedi in the expanded universe. Now, George Lucas has always had problems with the expanded universe, and in 2004 he made a very strange decree where he basically banned the creation of more Wookiee Jedi. This was right around the time of the Knights of the Old Republic 2 Sith Lords game, and it meant that the companion character Hanhar that characters can add to their squad was changed from being a Dark Jedi to a bounty hunter. Now, later on, George Lucas would, break his own rule. He would do this quite often with the creation of Gungi in the Clone Wars TV show. And now the Acolyte will be featuring the Wookiee Jedi Master Kelnacca, who, despite being a Jedi, is still a damn Wookiee, which means he's large, hairy, a bit more angry than your usual Jedi, and very dangerous, even if he means well. I can't wait to see him in action in the next few episodes. He was stationed on the planet of Brendok, so it'll be interesting to see just how guilty he is of whatever crimes the Jedi committed on that planet. But yeah, generally Wookiees were not common in the Jedi Order. Not many of them became Force sensitive, as Professor Hu Young tells Gungi in the Gathering episodes in the Clone Wars. But that doesn't mean that these large, intimidating beasts can't have a heart of gold and a positive impact on the galaxy. Also, the former Wookiee Grandmaster Tuvok, who was killed during the Stark Hyperspace War, was also recently canonized, so this is becoming a more common thing. I think, in general, George Lucas's one-off rule that Wookiees can't be Jedi was just a, kind of silly thing, in-the-moment thing, and I don't think that's no longer an issue anymore. And that's a good thing because, Wookiees are known for having a good connection to the Force. I mean, even Chewbacca has been considered as borderline Force sensitive by some writers. The Wookiees' homeworld is also obviously very rich in the Force. Kashyyyk is a place where everything seems to grow larger and deadlier, a result of terraforming perhaps, but also a sign of the Force's concentrated presence. The fact that in Legends, the original Jedi were made up of several species, including the Wookiees, only seems to support the idea that Wookiees were commonly found in the Jedi Order. So there you have it, guys. The three individual characters who are actually very interesting because of their racial backgrounds. You just don't normally see these type of Jedi in the Jedi Order. And so, I'm happy when I see this kind of stuff. I'm a lore nerd. I'm a content nerd. I always eat this stuff up. It does seem like the team behind the Acolytes knows Star Wars quite well. I know a lot of haters are saying the opposite, but I think they're coming into this with bad intentions. I'm not saying that, the Acolyte is the best thing that Star Wars has made. Again, we're going to wait until the entire show is done before doing a, true review of the series. But, it's definitely not terrible. I think it's somewhere in the middle right now. But anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. Hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. We will be continuing more Acolyte stuff as the season goes on. Anyway, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time. God, I'm tired.